I found the photograph at a flea market in Richmond, Virginia. It was a cool Saturday morning in October, the kind where fog still clings to the James River, and the vendors at Lakeside Market are just beginning to arrange their wares. I was browsing a table of old photographs and postcards when I saw it. A cabinet card in remarkably good condition, the image crisp and clear, despite being more than a century old. The photograph showed two women sitting side by side on an ornate stone bench in what appeared to be a garden. Trees were visible in the soft focus background, dappled sunlight filtering through leaves. Both women were smiling gently, their postures relaxed, their hands resting close together on the bench between them. The woman on the left was fair-skinned with light hair pinned up in the elaborate style of the late 1800s. She wore a beautiful Victorian gown with lace trim at the collar and cuffs, the fabric appearing to be silk or fine cotton. The woman on the right was dark-skinned with her hair pulled back neatly. She wore a simpler dress, dark-colored with a white Peter Pan collar and buttons down the front, but it was well made and clean. What struck me immediately was the apparent intimacy of the composition. The women sat close together, not quite touching, but closer than mere acquaintances. Their expressions were soft, almost affectionate. The photograph seemed to capture a genuine moment of friendship between two women who clearly cared for each other. On the back, written in faded brown ink, was this notation: Miss Catherine Hartwell and Lily Richmond, Virginia, June 1879. And below that, in different handwriting, much more recent, written in pencil, they said she was like family. Look at Lily's wrists. I examined the photograph more carefully, under the vendor's magnifying glass. When I looked closely at the black woman's wrists, where her hands rested on her lap, I could see faint marks, shadows that might have been scarring, old injuries that had healed but left their traces visible on her dark skin. I bought the photograph for $15 and took it home, unable to stop thinking about those marks on Lily's wrists and that cryptic note on the back. Over the following weeks, I began researching the Hartwell family at the Library of Virginia. The trail led me through city directories, census records, and eventually to a collection of family papers that had been donated to the Virginia Historical Society in the 1960s. From the 1880 census, Catherine Hartwell, white female, age 26, single, residing at 412 Grace Street, Richmond. Household includes Lily Freeman, black female, age 24, servant. The census listed Lily as a servant rather than an enslaved person because slavery had been abolished 15 years earlier by the 13th Amendment. But when I searched backward through earlier records, I found that Lily had been born enslaved on the Hartwell family plantation in 1855, 4 years after Catherine. From the Hartwell plantation records preserved at the Historical Society, Lily, female, born March 1855, to Sarah, house servant. Child assigned to attend young Miss Catherine as personal maid from age 6. Lily and Catherine had grown up together, with Lily serving Catherine from childhood. After emancipation in 1865, when Lily was 10 years old and Catherine was 14, Lily had remained with the Hartwell family as a paid servant. At least, that was how the records described her status. But the deeper I dug, the more complicated the story became. I found letters between Catherine Hartwell and her cousin in Charleston that painted a very different picture of their relationship. From a letter dated November 1879, Catherine Hartwell to her cousin Margaret Simmons. Dearest Margaret, your letter asking about Lily amuses me. You paint such a romantic picture of friendship between the races, as if the photograph we had taken in June represents some sort of sisterly bond. I suppose the image does give that impression. We look quite companionable sitting together on the garden bench, do we not? But you must understand, dear cousin, that public appearances and private realities are often quite different. Yes, Lily has been with me since we were children. Yes, she serves me faithfully and well. Yes, I occasionally demonstrate affection toward her in public settings, where such displays reinforce the image of the benevolent mistress caring for her devoted servant. But you ask if I consider her a friend, if I love her as a sister, as some abolitionists claim should be the natural state between women once the evil of slavery is abolished. I must be honest with you, Margaret. I do not. Lily is useful to me. She is well trained, obedient, and understands her place. She performs her duties without complaint and asks for little in return. But friendship? No. One does not befriend one's property, even if the law now claims she is free. You ask why Lily remains with me if she is legally free to leave. The answer is simple. Where would she go? She has no family, no education, no skills beyond those required to serve in a household like ours. She has no money saved, because I pay her just enough to purchase necessities and not enough to ever accumulate independence. She is bound to me not by law, but by circumstance, which I have carefully maintained to ensure her continued service. Mother taught me well how to manage servants in this new era. One must appear kind in public, hence photographs like the one we had taken, showing the devoted mistress and her loyal maid sitting together in apparent affection. One must speak of them warmly to outsiders, call them like family, demonstrate visible care and concern. But in private, one must maintain firm control. Lily understands this. She smiles in photographs and performs her role in public, but she knows what awaits her behind closed doors if she fails to serve with absolute perfection. I trust this satisfies your romantic curiosity about my relationship with my maid. We are not friends, dear cousin. We are mistress and servant, and however much the law may have changed, that relationship remains fundamentally unchanged. Your devoted cousin, Catherine. I found more troubling information in a diary kept by a woman named Elizabeth Morrison, who had been a neighbor of the Hartwells in Richmond during the 1880s. August 1881. I called upon Catherine Hartwell this afternoon and witnessed something that greatly disturbed me. As I was shown into the parlor by the maid Lily, I noticed the young woman's hands were trembling badly, and she kept her sleeves pulled down despite the heat. When Lily served tea, her hands shook so violently she nearly dropped the tray. Miss Hartwell's face darkened with anger, though she said nothing while I was present. But I saw Lily's expression, pure terror, as if she knew punishment awaited her the moment I departed. After Lily left the room, I mentioned to Miss Hartwell that her maid seemed unwell and perhaps should rest. Miss Hartwell waved off my concern, stating that Lily was prone to nervous fits and required firm management to maintain proper standards of service. As I was leaving, I saw Lily in the hallway. Her sleeve had ridden up slightly, and I glimpsed what appeared to be burns or scars on her forearm. When she noticed me looking, she quickly pulled her sleeve down and hurried away. I am troubled by what I observed. Miss Hartwell speaks publicly of Lily with great affection, calling her like family, and displaying her in public settings as evidence of her kind treatment of former slaves. But something in Lily's eyes suggested deep fear, and those marks on her arm spoke of something darker than the benevolent relationship Miss Hartwell portrays. I mentioned my concerns to my husband, but he reminded me that what transpires between a mistress and her servant is private business, and that former slaves often require firm discipline to ensure proper behavior in their new status as free workers. He advised me not to interfere in matters I do not fully understand. But I cannot forget Lily's face, cannot stop wondering what causes a young woman to tremble with such terror in her mistress's presence. I found the most detailed account in a testimony given years later by a woman named Clara Washington, who had worked briefly as a cook in the Hartwell household in 1883. Testimony of Clara Washington, interviewed 1935 by the Federal Writers Project, WPA Slave Narrative Collection. I was born free in 1860, so I never knew slavery myself, but my mama had been enslaved, and she taught me to recognize bondage in whatever form it took. When I worked in the Hartwell house in Richmond in 1883, I recognized it in what Miss Catherine did to Lily Freeman. On the surface, Miss Catherine treated Lily like a treasured companion. In public, or when visitors called, she spoke to Lily with warmth, sometimes even affection. She had photographs taken with Lily, showing them sitting together like friends. She told people Lily was like family, and that she loved her like a sister. But behind closed doors, Miss Catherine was cruel in ways I had never witnessed even under slavery, because her cruelty was deliberate and calculated rather than merely casual violence. Lily was required to be perfect in every aspect of her service. The slightest mistake, a teacup not precisely positioned, a collar not perfectly starched, a floor not cleaned to invisible standards, resulted in punishment. Miss Catherine never struck Lily where marks would be visible. She had learned from her mother sophisticated methods of causing pain without leaving evidence that could be seen by outsiders. She used small instruments, heated hair irons pressed briefly to Lily's arms or back, thin switches that left marks that faded within days, tight bindings around Lily's wrists that cut off circulation but left only faint scarring. The worst punishment was what Miss Catherine called discipline training. If Lily made an error, Miss Catherine would bind Lily's wrists tightly with cord and make her kneel in the basement for hours, sometimes overnight. Lily was forbidden to make any sound, forbidden to shift position, forbidden to sleep. If she failed to maintain absolute stillness and silence, the punishment would be extended. I witnessed this once when I went to the basement to fetch preserved vegetables. I found Lily kneeling on the stone floor, her wrists bound in front of her, dried tear tracks on her face, but her expression completely blank, as if she had retreated somewhere deep inside herself to survive. When I tried to help her, Lily whispered desperately for me not to interfere, that it would only make things worse for her. She begged me to forget what I had seen, to never speak of it to anyone. I went to Miss Catherine and said I was quitting, that I could not work in a house where such things occurred. Miss Catherine was not troubled by my departure. She simply smiled and reminded me that if I spoke to anyone about what I had witnessed, no one would believe me. She was a respected member of Richmond society, and Lily was a former slave who remained with her employer by choice. Who would credit the word of a cook over the reputation of a lady? She was right. I tried to tell people what I had seen, but they dismissed my concerns. They pointed to the photographs of Miss Catherine and Lily sitting together in apparent friendship, to Miss Catherine's public demonstrations of affection, to Lily's continued service in the household. They said Lily would leave if she were truly mistreated, that her remaining proved Miss Catherine's kindness, but they did not understand how Miss Catherine had trapped Lily. Lily had no money. Miss Catherine paid her barely enough to purchase necessities. Lily had no family. They had all died or been sold away before emancipation. Lily had no education. Miss Catherine had never permitted her to learn to read or write. Lily had nowhere to go and no means of survival outside the Hartwell household. And Miss Catherine had spent years conditioning Lily to believe she was worthless, that she deserved punishment, that she should be grateful for Miss Catherine's care despite the abuse. Lily could not conceive of leaving because Miss Catherine had systematically destroyed her ability to imagine any other life. The photographs Miss Catherine had taken with Lily were not evidence of friendship. They were evidence of control, carefully staged images designed to present the appearance of benevolence while concealing the reality of continued bondage. I found records of Lily Freeman's death in the Virginia Death Register. Lily Freeman, date of death, March 14, 1889. Age, 34. Cause of death, pneumonia. Place of death, Hartwell Residence, 412 Grace Street, Richmond. Additional notation. Deceased had been in service to the Hartwell family since childhood. Attended by family physician, who noted the deceased was severely underweight and showed evidence of old scarring on wrists and forearms. Death attributed to pneumonia complicated by general poor health. Lily had died at age 34, having spent her entire life in service to the Hartwell family. First as an enslaved child assigned to attend Catherine Hartwell, then as a supposedly free servant who remained in the same role under the same control, just without the legal designation of slavery. I found one final document, a letter written in 1890 by Catherine Hartwell to her cousin less than a year after Lily's death. April 1890. Dear Margaret, you inquire about replacing Lily since her death last year. I confess I have had difficulty finding a suitable replacement. Lily was so perfectly trained, so completely molded to my requirements, that other servants seem inadequate by comparison. She knew exactly how I liked things done, anticipated my needs before I voiced them, never questioned my authority or my methods of ensuring her obedience. I had her from childhood, you see, and was able to shape her into the ideal servant. These girls hired from the city have not had the advantage of being raised in proper service from youth. They are impudent, questioning, too aware of their supposed freedom. They require much more intensive training, and still never achieve the perfect submission that Lily demonstrated. I sometimes think the abolition of slavery was a great mistake. Not because I believe in the institution itself, I am too modern for such views, but because it has made the management of servants so much more difficult. One must now rely on economic dependency and psychological control rather than legal ownership, and these prove less reliable methods of ensuring absolute obedience. I miss Lily, not because I cared for her. One does not develop sentimental attachments to servants, but because she was useful and well-trained. Finding another servant who will accept the level of discipline I require without leaving or creating difficulties has proven challenging in this modern era, when former slaves believe themselves entitled to choose their own circumstances. I have been searching for a young girl, preferably one with no family and limited prospects, whom I might train from youth as I trained Lily. If you know of such a child, I would be grateful for the introduction. Your cousin, Catherine. I had the photograph analyzed by a historian at the University of Virginia who specializes in post-emancipation African-American history and the psychology of control. Analysis of the Hartwell Freeman photograph, June 1879. Dr. Robert Mitchell, Professor of History. This photograph documents one of the most insidious aspects of post-emancipation life in the South, the continuation of slavery's psychological dynamics under the guise of free labor and benevolent paternalism. The image shows Catherine Hartwell, a white woman from a prominent Richmond family, sitting with Lily Freeman, a black woman who had been enslaved by the Hartwell family from birth and continued to serve Catherine after emancipation. The composition is carefully staged to present an image of affection and friendship. The women sit close together, their hands nearly touching, their expressions gentle and warm. This is not accidental. Catherine Hartwell deliberately created these photographs to document her supposed benevolence, to show the world that she treated her former slaves with kindness and that they remained with her by choice. But documentary evidence tells a different story. Behind the carefully constructed public image, Catherine Hartwell maintained absolute control over Lily Freeman through economic dependency, psychological manipulation, and physical abuse. Lily could not leave because she had no money, no education, no family, nowhere to go. She had been conditioned from childhood to accept Catherine's authority as absolute, to believe she deserved punishment for any imperfection, to see herself as worthless except in her capacity to serve. The photograph's historical significance lies in what it reveals about how slavery's essential dynamics persisted after legal emancipation. Lily Freeman was legally free, but remained in bondage, economic bondage through poverty, psychological bondage through conditioning, physical bondage through abuse that was carefully hidden from public view. Under magnification, faint scarring is visible on Lily's wrists, where her hands rest in her lap. This scarring is consistent with repeated binding, evidence that Catherine used physical restraint as punishment, continuing practices from slavery under the guise of disciplining a free servant. The photograph asks us to see two friends, two women sharing a moment of genuine affection. But if we know how to read it correctly, we see something very different: a perpetrator and her victim, a woman who maintained absolute control, and a woman who had no escape. Abuse disguised as benevolence, bondage disguised as freedom. This is important because it shows how photographs can lie, how images can be staged to conceal truth rather than reveal it. Catherine Hartwell knew exactly what she was doing when she had this photograph made. She was creating evidence of her benevolence, documentation of Lily's supposed choice to remain in service, proof that she was a kind mistress rather than an abuser. But the truth is visible in the details, if you know where to look. In the scarring on Lily's wrists, in the carefully maintained economic dependency that gave Lily no alternatives, in the psychological conditioning that destroyed Lily's ability to imagine life outside Catherine's control, in the systematic abuse that was hidden behind public displays of affection. Lily Freeman died at 34, having spent every day of her life in service to the Hartwell family. She was legally free for 24 of those years, but she was never actually free. She lived and died in bondage, just under a different name, with different justifications, documented by photographs that claimed to show friendship, but actually showed continued slavery, in all but legal designation. I donated the photograph and all related documents to the Valentine Richmond History Center. The photograph is now part of an exhibition examining how slavery's dynamics persisted after emancipation through economic exploitation, psychological control, and carefully maintained public deceptions. The exhibition text reads, Catherine Hartwell and Lily Freeman, June 1879. This photograph appears to show two women sharing a moment of genuine friendship. Catherine Hartwell, a white woman from a prominent Richmond family, sits beside Lily Freeman, a black woman who served in the Hartwell household. They sit close together on a garden bench, their expressions warm and gentle, their hands resting near each other in what seems like easy companionship. But this photograph is a carefully constructed lie. Lily Freeman was born enslaved to the Hartwell family in 1855. She was assigned to serve Catherine from age 6, and she remained in Catherine's service for her entire life, first as an enslaved child, then after emancipation as a supposedly free servant. But Lily was never free. Catherine Hartwell maintained absolute control through economic dependency, paying Lily just enough to survive, but never enough to save money or leave. Catherine isolated Lily from potential support systems, ensuring she had no family connections or outside relationships. Catherine used physical punishment and psychological abuse to enforce perfect obedience while maintaining a public image of benevolence. Photographs like this one were part of Catherine's strategy. They documented her supposed kindness, provided evidence that Lily remained by choice, and reinforced the fiction that their relationship was one of mutual affection rather than control and abuse. Look closely at Lily's wrists, where her hands rest in her lap. Under magnification, faint scarring is visible, evidence of repeated binding, physical restraint used as punishment. Abuse carefully hidden from public view, but documented nevertheless in this photograph that was meant to conceal it. Lily died in 1889, at age 34, having never known a single day of actual freedom, despite living 24 years after legal emancipation. She died in the same household, where she had been born enslaved, serving the same family, subject to the same control, trapped by circumstances that proved as effective as legal slavery had been. This photograph is significant because it shows how images can be weaponized to conceal truth, how public performances of benevolence can mask private cruelty, how slavery's essential dynamics persisted after legal abolition through economic exploitation and psychological control. This 1879 photo seems sweet, two women sitting together in apparent friendship, their expressions warm and gentle. But experts examining the photograph discovered something disturbing. The faint scarring on Lily's wrists, the documented abuse behind closed doors, the carefully maintained economic dependency, the psychological conditioning that destroyed Lily's ability to imagine freedom. They said she was like family. They pointed to photographs like this as proof of affection and choice. But Lily Freeman died at 34, never having experienced actual freedom, trapped in bondage that persisted after emancipation under different names with different justifications, but with the same essential reality. One woman exercising absolute control over another woman's life, body, and future. The photograph hangs in the exhibition now. Two women sitting close together on a stone bench, smiling softly as if sharing quiet friendship. But now visitors know to look more closely, to see the scarring on Lily's wrists, to understand the economic dependency that trapped her, to recognize the psychological control that made escape impossible, to read the documented evidence of abuse concealed behind the carefully staged image of benevolence. It seems sweet. It was designed to seem sweet. That was the entire purpose, to create visual evidence of kindness that could be displayed to anyone who questioned Catherine's treatment of her servants, to document Lily's apparent choice to remain, to prove that slavery's abolition had transformed their relationship into something voluntary and affectionate. But photographs lie when they are carefully staged to conceal truth. And this photograph lied for more than a century, until researchers uncovered the documents that revealed what was really happening behind the image of two women sitting peacefully together in a garden on a June afternoon in 1879. Lily Freeman, 1855-1889, born enslaved. Died supposedly free, but actually trapped in bondage that persisted through economic exploitation, psychological control, and physical abuse that was hidden from public view while being documented in scars on her wrists, visible in this photograph if you know where to look and understand what you are seeing. This photograph is her memorial and her testimony. Not the memorial Catherine Hartwell intended, evidence of benevolence and willing service, but the memorial Lily deserves, evidence of abuse disguised as affection, bondage disguised as freedom, slavery persisting after legal abolition through methods that proved as effective as the chains and bills of sale had been before the law changed, but human cruelty remained constant.